In our final lesson of our unit on key ideas, let's apply what we have learned through a few examples on IXL. In our first example, we are going to read a passage about the Great Blue Hole. Off the coast of the Central American country of Belize, there is a giant dark blue circle in the ocean. Its dark color is due to a 400-foot deep hole in the ocean floor below it. The hole is actually an underwater cave. Because of its enormous size and color, this spot has been named the Great Blue Hole. Scientists have found the Great Blue Hole to be an unusual place. Inside the hole are large stalactites. Stalactites are long, pointed rocks that hang from the ceilings and walls of caves. They form when water drips from the ceiling over a long period of time. Stalactites cannot form underwater because water cannot drip in the ocean. So scientists know that the underwater cave was once on dry land. Over time, the cave became submerged as sea levels rose. Another unusual finding is a layer of poisonous gas deep within the hole. The layer of gas cuts out all sunlight, and there is no evidence of sea life below this gas. Divers have explored the Great Blue Hole for many years, and explorers mapped the area in the 1990s. But no one traveled to the bottom until 2018 when a team of scientists took pictures of the entire hole. With the help of a special underwater craft and sonar technology, they were able to move through the cave and create a 3D map of the inside of the cave. Now, we're asked to answer the following question. Before 2018, no one had reached the bottom of the Great Blue Hole. Based on clues in the text, what is the most likely reason why? So our options are: the Great Blue Hole was not discovered until 2018. No one knew how deep the hole was. Divers were not allowed in the protected site. It was too hard and dangerous to get to. So let's look at some of the details in the passage and see if we can determine why no one reached the bottom of the hole until 2018. Let's see if we can identify some of the key details from the text. So in the second paragraph, we're told that scientists have found the Great Blue Hole to be an unusual place. It mentions that they found large stalactites, which are long pointed rocks that hang from ceilings. But this is unusual because stalactites cannot form underwater. So what do scientists know based on this information? Is that the cave was once on dry land and then over time became submerged. Another finding is the layer of poisonous gas deep within the hole. So that might be an important detail for us to keep in mind. And it says that it cuts out all sunlight and there's no evidence of sea life below the gas. So those may be some important details for us to remember. Now, let's take a look at this last paragraph. It says divers explored the Great Blue Hole for many years. So we do know that the hole was explored for a long time. We know that the area was mapped in the 90s. But no one traveled to the bottom until 2018 when a team of scientists took pictures of the entire hole. And it says that they had the help of a special underwater craft and sonar technology. So that is an important detail to remember. So help of a special underwater craft and sonar technology. So based on these details, which is most likely the reason that no one reached the bottom of the hole until 2018? So our first option says the Great Blue Hole was not discovered until 2018. Well, we know that that is not true because we had a detail in the passage that says that the hole was mapped in the 90s. So, of course, it had been discovered. No one knew how deep the hole was. Could be. So we will put a question mark right here as a possibility. Divers were not allowed in the protected site. Is there anything in the passage that said anything about the site being protected? Well, first of all, there's no mention of it being protected. Two, we do know that divers did map the hole in the 90s. Explorers, they did some diving. So we know that that one is not true as well. It was too hard and dangerous to get to. This one might be a possibility as well. So let's look at our last paragraph again, because there's a couple of key details that will help us determine which of our answer choices best answers the question. Let's look at this paragraph once again. Divers have explored the Great Blue Hole for many years, and explorers mapped the area in the 1990s, but no one traveled to the bottom until 2018, when a team of scientists took pictures of the entire hole. With the help of a special underwater craft and sonar technology, they were able to move through the cave and create a 3D map of the inside of the cave. Now, they used a special underwater craft and sonar technology. Why would they need a special underwater craft? Well, anytime that scientists are exploring areas of the ocean that they are not sure are safe for divers to get to, they will often use underwater craft, as well as sonar technology. So based on the fact that they had to use a special craft to maneuver through the cave, helps us conclude that it was too hard and dangerous for a diver to get to. So based on that information, we can then conclude that the reason why no one reached the bottom until 2018 was because it was too hard and dangerous to get to. Let's take a look at this passage about Cesar Chavez and work through some of the questions to practice identifying supporting details within a text that can be used as evidence to identify key ideas and support claims made by the author. Cesar Chavez was a hero to many farm workers in the United States. Today, streets, parks, and schools across America are named after him. Like other leaders before him, he wanted people to be treated fairly. He spent his life fighting for change. When Chavez was 11 years old, his family lost their home. They became migrant farm workers, which means that they traveled from one farm to another to pick crops. Most of their days were spent working for hours in the hot sun. Chavez became upset with the way his family and other farm workers were treated. Chavez's family did not make much money, and they often slept outside or in their car. Sometimes they were hungry. Chavez couldn't go to school when he was picking crops, and he left school for good after 8th grade. but Chavez loved to read and to learn new things. For example, he read about nonviolent protests, which were practiced by leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mohandas Gandhi. These leaders worked for change peacefully. Even when they were attacked, they never hit back. Years later, Chavez would use these ideas to help change the lives of farm workers. In 1962, Chavez helped start a new group called the National Farm Workers Association. This group or union would keep farm workers safe and help them make more money. But there was a problem. The farm owners would not talk to the union. How could a union change the way workers were treated if it couldn't get the farm owners' attention? Chavez's union started by working with a group of farm workers who were picking grapes. The group was on strike, refusing to pick the grapes until the farm owners listened to them. Chavez led the group on a 300-mile march to Sacramento, the capital of California. During the march, Chavez and the farm workers told many people about their strike. The union asked people all over the United States to stop buying grapes, and so millions of people stopped buying and eating grapes, which made the farm owners lose money. Chavez made sure that his group did not fight or hurt anyone. He believed that there were other ways to get the farm owners' attention. After 5 years, the union succeeded. The farm owners promised to pay the farm workers more, help pay for their doctor's visits, and make rules to keep them safe at work. So our first question that we need to answer is, who is the text about? Well, we do know that it is about Cesar Chavez, but which option best answers the question to describe who Cesar Chavez was? Cesar Chavez, a union leader who helped many farm workers. Cesar Chavez, a farm worker who saved many animals. Cesar Chavez, a successful farm owner who employed many workers. Or Cesar Chavez, a school teacher who taught many farm workers. Well, as you recall in the passage, there was a lot of talk about the National Farm Workers Association being a union that set out to help farm workers get the farm owners' attention to take care of basic things like making sure they stayed safe at work and covering their medical care. So, our first option best describes who Cesar Chavez was. It doesn't mention him being anything about a farm owner. He was a farm worker. He was a migrant farm worker, but there's no mention of him saving animals. And there's no mention of him being a school teacher. So Cesar Chavez, a union leader who helped many farm workers, is the correct answer. Now we are asked to use clues in the text to determine what working on a farm was like for migrant workers when Chavez was a child. Now, we are told specifically to review paragraph 2, so let's see if we can identify details in the second paragraph to help us answer this question. So when Chavez was 11 years old, his family lost their home. They became migrant farm workers, which means that they traveled from one farm to another to pick crops. So we know that being a migrant farm worker meant that they traveled from one farm to another. Most of their days were spent working for hours in the hot sun. So that's another important detail. Says that Chavez became upset with the way his family and other farm workers were treated. They did not make much money, and they often slept outside or in their car. Sometimes they were hungry. So, based on these details, which option best describes what life was like for a migrant farm worker? Was it slow and boring, a good way to make money, a lot of fun, or tiring and difficult? Well, slow and boring doesn't really make sense. They worked long hours, they stayed busy, but it doesn't really give us any indication that it was slow and boring. We know the second one is not true because here we are told that Chavez's family did not make much money. So we know it wasn't a good way to make money. Was it a lot of fun? Well, it depends on your definition of fun. If you're traveling from one farm to another, working long hours in the hot sun, not making much money, having to sleep outside or in your car, being hungry, do those activities sound fun? No. So we know that really wasn't a lot of fun for the migrant farm worker. Tiring and difficult is best supported by the details in this passage. All the travel, the long hours, not really making much money, being hungry, having to sleep in your car or maybe even outside would make this life tiring and difficult. Let's take a look at the word that is bolded in paragraph 3. The word is nonviolent. So we are asked, what is the meaning of nonviolent as used in the text? Is it not using many people, not hurting or harming others, not using words or signs, or not having any success? So let's take a look at how it is used in the passage. It says, for example, he read about nonviolent protests which were practiced by leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mohandas Gandhi. These leaders worked for change peacefully. So that is an important word to help us determine what nonviolent means. When they were attacked, they never hit back. Years later, Chavez would use these ideas to help change the lives of farm workers. So, these nonviolent protests were peaceful and they never fought back. Based on those two details, we can determine that the meaning of nonviolent as used in this text means not hurting or harming others. Says, based on the text, what were two things that the union did to get the farm owners' attention? So let's see if we can highlight specific details that outline what the union did. In 1962, Chavez helped start a new group called the National Farm Workers Association. So it said that they would keep farm workers safe and help them make more money. So the farm owners will not talk. So how was the union going to change the way the workers were treated? So what did they do to get their attention? Well, first, the union started by working with a group of farm workers who were picking grapes. So the group went on strike, refusing to pick grapes until the farm owners listened to them. Then he led the group on a 300-mile march to Sacramento. So they told many people about the strike, and they asked people to stop buying grapes. So what happened? Millions of people stopped buying and eating grapes, and that made the farm owners lose money. So Chavez said that they didn't fight or hurt anyone, but this got their attention. So after 5 years, says the union succeeded. So based on the information in these details, what two things did the union do to get their attention? They joined with farm workers who refused to pick grapes. Yes, that was one of the details. They started growing and selling their own grapes at a cheaper price. No, they actually convinced millions of Americans to stop buying grapes and eating them. They cause farm owners to lose money by asking people not to buy grapes. Yes. And then they burned down the grapevine so that no grapes could be sold. Well, we're told that their protest was non-violent. They didn't harm anyone or anything, which burning down grapevines would be a harm and could potentially harm people. So we know that's not true. So the two things they did was join with farm workers who refused to pick grapes, and then they caused farm owners to lose money by asking people not to buy grapes. So now let's see if we can determine what the best summary is of our passage on Cesar Chavez. So which is the best summary of the text? So which is the best summary of the text? Cesar Chavez grew up as a farm worker. When he was older, he began working with leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mohandas Gandhi. Later, Chavez became famous for inventing what came to be known as nonviolent protests. Now, did he actually work with Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi? No, he read about them and he learned about these ideas of nonviolent protests from them. He didn't invent them. So we know the first one is not a good summary. Cesar Chavez started out working on a farm. Even though he quit school when he was young, he taught himself how to read. Later, he taught other farm workers how to read. Because of his work, many schools today are named after Chavez. Does the passage say anything about him teaching others how to read, or anything about schools being named after him? No, none of these details are in this passage, so we know that that is not a good summary. The last one has to be our correct answer, but let's take a look at it. Cesar Chavez worked on a farm when he was young. He saw how poorly farm workers were treated, and he decided to help change things. He started a union and got farm owners to pay more attention to the workers. The union helped improve the lives of farm workers. Now this we know is true because the passage deals quite a bit with how farm workers were being treated and how Chavez started this union to try to help negotiate with the farm owners to make things better for the workers. They want to work, but they want to make sure that they're safe and that they're compensated and taken care of. So the last option is our best summary. Before we end our lesson, let's look at a couple of informational passages and see if we can use the details within the text to help us put events in their correct order. Let's look at our first passage. Have you ever seen a lava lamp? You can make something that looks like one at home. First, fill a tall, clear drinking glass with water. Make sure to leave an inch of room at the top. Next, slowly add a quarter cup of vegetable oil. Finally, sprinkle a pinch of salt on top. The lava will begin moving up and down in the glass. Now, based on the details in the text, let's see if we can put these events in order. But before we do, let's make note of some words that will help us determine the correct order. So we are told, first, fill a tall, clear drinking glass with water. So first thing is fill a glass with water. And then make sure to leave an inch of room at the top. Next, slowly add a quarter cup of vegetable oil. So now we're going to pinch of salt on top. So then we're going to sprinkle salt. So based on the details in the passage, let's see if we can put them in order. All right, so first we're going to put water in the glass. Then we're going to put oil in the glass. And then finally, sprinkle salt into the glass. So it was nice that they actually put them in order for us. This is not always going to be the case when you're working through these problems on IXL, but the main thing here is that you need to learn to look for the specific details in the passage to help you put these events or steps in order. Let's look at one final example. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were German brothers who collected folk songs and stories. Their first collection, later known as Grimm's Fairy Tales, appeared in 3 volumes between 1812 and 1822. In 1826, they published a collection of Irish fairy tales that they had translated into German. Later, the brothers began working on a German dictionary. Both brothers died, though before the dictionary was finished. So let's see if we can determine the order that these events took place. All right, so we know that they collected folk songs and stories. Their first collection, later known as Grimm's Fairy Tales, appeared in 3 volumes between 1812 and 1822. All right, so we know that first came Grimm's Fairy Tales. Then it says in 1826, okay, so Grimm's Fairy Tales was between 1812 and 1822. In 1826, they published a collection of Irish fairy tales. So the second thing they did was the Irish fairy tales. And then finally, it says later, the brothers began working on a German dictionary. So the third thing that they did was the German dictionary. Now let's see if we can use these details to put the events in order. So the brothers began to work on a German dictionary was actually the last thing that they did. So that was the third event. A collection of Irish fairy tales is published was the second event. And then Grimm's Fairy Tales is published was the first thing that they did. So based on the details, this is the correct order of events.